I loved it. I loved the smells. I didn't like a rabbit stew. I had a pet rabbit at the time and I couldn't bear to eat rabbit.
Things I've eaten: a chocolate-covered scorpion and kangaroo in chocolate sauce as a savoury dish.
Ooh, yeah. We're talking about plenty of vegetables, fresh fruit, whole grains and nuts and seeds and legumes, pulses, beans and herbs and spices.
Chuck it in a pan and see what happens.
It will cook in minutes. You've got yourself the most brilliant vegetables.
Sitting there going, but why? It's just blueberry powder. But you can pick up blueberries in the supermarket over there. Why can't I put it in a supplement? I am that kid that if there's something strange on the menu, I will order that just to find out what it tastes like. Welcome back to the Not Quite Pod. Today we've got Emma with us. Emma, do you just quickly want to introduce yourself and let everyone know a bit about yourself?
Amazing. Hi. Thank you, Charlie, for having me on. Amazing. I am a nutritionist, which means that my whole work is involved in food and encouraging people to eat well. That's my focus. And my field or my passionate interest within that work has actually been perimenopause and postmenopause health. And I can't say that's midlife health because it's not necessarily in midlife, and we might go into that in itself. But that's me. That's what I do. And I love food anyway. And I love eating food. I love cooking food. So it's just great that it's actually also my work.
I'm so excited about this conversation for two reasons. One is I'm a massive foodie myself, and two, menopause is, I say this as a 25-year-old man, menopause is one of them things that is kind of this unknown entity that no one really speaks properly about, but it's kind of like half taboo, half not. So I was really intrigued to open the conversation, particularly as a 25-year-old, to start the conversation earlier so that people actually know what it's all about. And so that's why I was hoping to get you on, Emma, so I'm actually buzzing for this conversation. But just to start us off, where did the love of nutrition and food come from?
Oh, right. Okay. Well, that goes way back. As often these things do, it's just literally watching my mum cook in the kitchen. I mean, it's nothing revolutionary, but I was very privileged to have mum standing in the kitchen most nights cooking a meal. And that was just fantastic. And I would often just hang in the kitchen because I didn't want to get on with my homework. And so I loved it. I loved the smells. I didn't like a rabbit stew. I had a pet rabbit at the time and I couldn't bear to eat rabbit. But apart from that, I just loved it. And I love baked potatoes. And she slopped, her stew on top of baked potatoes. And anyway, I love it. And so I wasn't very academic at school. So I thought, well, what can I do? And so I did a kind of a hotel and catering degree. But my favorite part of that was the chefing, because you had to learn a bit about chefing. And I took that further and learned more about chefing and then started cooking and becoming a chef. And that's my history of my love of food. But then I did a degree in nutrition about 15 years ago. And that's changed everything for me.
It's amazing. I mean, it's very similar to where my love of food comes from, with my mum being quite a good cook and introducing me to lots of different foods very early. So I am that kid that if there's something strange on the menu, I will order that just to find out what it tastes like.
Amazing. No, I love that attitude. That's fantastic. Yeah, good. Great.
As my dad always says, you don't know unless you try. So
I was just wondering, just really interested in what's your most unusual food, or what you think of as the weirdest one you've eaten.
So this shocks a lot of friends and probably will shock a lot of listeners. So the two weirdest things I've eaten are, one is a chocolate-covered scorpion. And
no. Okay, right.
I had that at a restaurant in London that sells exotic food, different foods, and it was purely like my mum took me there, was like, this is right up Charlie's street, he'll love it. And then the second weirdest one was because of, it's an unusual food, but it was the combination of the two things, which was kangaroo, but it was kangaroo in chocolate sauce as a savoury dish.
Ooh,
and I was thinking, I was thinking kind of along the lines of like, oh, it's going to be like a chili, there'll be like undertones. No. It was like a dessert sauce with this kangaroo. Weirdly, one of my weird favorite combos was the potato and chocolate. I don't know why it worked. I have no idea why.
Yeah.
That that gives people an idea as to how weird my food comes from. It's not all that weird before everyone starts thinking, what the hell does Charlie do on a daily basis? But yes, that's probably the two weirdest things I've eaten.
Yeah, that is very, very weird. So we got onto that, and we got onto our how lucky we were with the fact that we actually had home cooks. Like we literally grew up with a mum or a dad in the kitchen cooking, and that is absolutely lovely. So that's me, and that was my background in food, definitely. Yeah, yeah.
So where did the link of bringing in your knowledge of nutrition and food and then bringing in the menopause, when did that all come together?
Okay, so when I qualified with my nutrition degree, I was still living in Sydney, Australia then, and I had a friend who was a gynecologist, and we were talking a lot about, I was talking about how food can influence female hormones, or it's certainly the expression of them, as in the symptoms you might get from female hormone balance or imbalance. And she was sharing with me her knowledge as well. And she was just starting a clinic, and she asked me, would I like to join her? Amazing, absolutely eye-opening, brilliant. So I would see women in her gynecology clinic. She had other practitioners in there as well. She was very, very forward thinking. She had a psychotherapist in there. She had an
Wow.
acupuncturist. Yeah. So I primarily saw women actually in midlife, and I was in midlife myself anyway, and so it kind of fitted really well because I was so interested in this, and I saw how food made a difference to them, and I just delved deeper and deeper. I go down rabbit holes in research. I love it actually, and I really think I wish I had been a researcher in a sense, but I just really like reading about what science has to say about this. I was seeing it in my clinic, but I wanted to see where the science backed up what I was seeing, the helpfulness, so to speak, of what these food changes in these women and their symptoms, their hormone symptoms.
That's insane. I mean, I myself get sort of caught in research holes all the time. But where for anyone that doesn't know, to take a step back, because some people don't know, what is the menopause and what is the perimenopause?
Okay, such a good question, Charlie. Seriously, you're right. Because there's some terminology here that's being used more commonly now, but really, menopause is the only word most people know.
Yeah.
But there's this terminology, perimenopause, now, which is much being used more. So, menopause is a time in we'll call them a woman's life. So, somebody who was born a woman, a time in a woman's life when she hasn't had a period for 1 year.
Yeah.
So, statistically, this happens around the age of 50, 51, or certainly in the UK, that's the statistic age. And that's how they say, okay, you're now in the menopause. You haven't had a period for 12 months. The time before menopause is actually called perimenopause, not whole time, but the time where your hormones begin to change and fluctuate. And for a person, this could be maybe just in the last year before her menopause, or it could be 3 years prior to that. She kind of notices changes, but for some people, they notice changes 10 years before they actually go into menopause, and that's perimenopause. And then we've got some outliers here. We've got people who go into what they call early menopause or premature menopause, and well, actually not premature, they call it early menopause, and that's menopause before the age of 40. And then you've got premature ovarian insufficiency, which is shortened to POI, which is actually where you have a super early menopause in your 20s and your 30s.
Wow.
Sorry, not your 30s, sorry, in your 20s, when you're very young. And it does happen. It is rare, but it does happen. And I have a few people I follow, certainly, and have kind of connected with, which they're in their 20s and they have no periods because they're in what's called premature ovarian insufficiency, which is effectively menopause, but in your 20s. So
That's
that's the categorizing. And don't absolutely quote me on those kind of timings.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I know absolutely hard stop menopause is 12 months after your last period.
That's I didn't even. I mean, it's probably my own naivety, but to even think that it affects you, some people that early. I mean,
Yeah.
literally, you'd be talking my partner's age around
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
That's I yeah. I'd never even
Yeah.
thought of it, but I suppose it's that whole thing of you never.
Yeah. It's mind
There's always
boggling.
there's always outliers. There's always changes.
Yes. Yes. And
Oh
can you imagine for those people, it really is. I mean, it's not just significant. It's life changing, most
yeah,
definitely, and to come to terms with that and deal with that and understand it takes a lot. And now there's a lot. Well, I would say, but I'm very in this now. I
yeah,
know a lot of people in this now, so I don't know from the outside, so to speak, now. But there is a lot more support now. But even just 5 years ago, there wasn't at all. Certainly for this POI or even this early menopause. Early menopause, you could imagine, say, a woman, has just had a baby and she goes
yeah.
into menopause. So she's having to deal with this little tiny baby, and then the kind of sometimes the really shitty symptoms of menopause. So that's an early menopause one, and that's not nice either. So yeah,
Wow. Is there any, I mean, I know menopause is very individual to each individual, but are
yeah.
there any sort of dead giveaways for someone who's not sure if they're going through the beginning of the menopause? Is there any dead giveaways?
Yeah. So, well, the period is one,
Yeah.
definitely. So it's about that, the person hasn't had, but really what you're talking about, are there any dead giveaways for someone being in perimenopause?
Yeah.
Which is actually where a lot of these, what we think of as menopause symptoms, really kick in. So the classic ones that the medical profession and and everybody else used to think of was things like when someone gets like a hot flush and they haven't got a
Yeah.
cold, they're not ill, there's nothing wrong, they're not, for instance, they're not flushing because perhaps they're shy or there's
Yeah.
anxiety going on. They just
Yeah.
have this random hot flush. And when I say hot flush, it really feels this incredible heat inside them and it expresses themselves in a hot flush. And it can actually be quite embarrassing for some people, to really like flash up.
Yeah.
Think of
Yeah.
a business person sitting in a meeting, and they're just flushing up, and it's just
Yeah.
like bizarre. So it's really uncomfortable, and so there's that one. And then kind of to go with that, you think of not they call night sweats or sweats in the daytime, and that's another
Yeah.
classic, typically thought of as menopause symptom, but it actually happens in perimenopause, and so you might get night sweats and so disturb sleep. But actually, there's way more than 20, 30, 40 symptoms that can now be attributed to the perimenopause. Random things like, so itching skin, dry eyes, um, literally dry mouth, and not enough saliva, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that the dryness, so to speak, goes right down to a woman's vagina. That's also a typical symptom. And so there's that. Then there's the like hair falling out randomly, and then there's this disturbed sleep, which
Yeah.
really, so it's not just about hot flushes, it's disturbed sleep, where why can't I either go to sleep or why am I waking up wired at 2 or 3 a.m. Now I know this can happen to people outside of perimenopause or early postmenopause situation, but in fact it's symptoms, and you can imagine the knock-on effect
Yeah.
psychologically for people if they don't get enough quality sleep. I mean, it's just a roller coaster. Anxiety, lack of joy, mild depression. Yeah. And
I suppose.
then mood changes, energy
Yeah.
changes. Sorry, I will stop there.
No, it's fine. I mean, I can just see it's a lot to do with. I can imagine the chemical imbalances cause absolute chaos on the body. I mean, one of the ones that I'm very
Yeah,
aware of is the struggling to sleep, and then the impact,
yeah,
like you say, the impact of someone's day to day life just by not being able to sleep. But
yeah,
like anything to do with this sort of area. It's all hormonal and gets very tricky to predict and know how to help someone. And that was one thing I wanted to ask: is there any way you can as a family member of someone who might be going through perimenopause, is there anything we can do to support them through it?
Well, that's such a fabulous question. First of all, often it's the family member that notices it more in a sense, and tries to put the dots together, and might be able to introduce the conversation with that person, saying, well, what do you think? Do you think it's your hormones, or maybe you didn't have a period last month? I'm not sure how intimate that person is with them,
Yeah,
but or they might just say, look, hey, I can just see you're really down. Do you want to go and see your GP, or that sort of thing?
yeah,
So it often is a family member. And then the family member themselves can investigate this is as well. And there's now a lot of good resources online. There is a website called Menopause Support. There is a website called Balance Menopause. And there's another called Health in Menopause. They're all really good, really good, top quality factual information written by doctors or educators and experts in this area. So that's very, very, very good, because often your GP doesn't actually know. They might not be, in fact, up to speed on this. So there's a lot more information from quality sites online.
I was going to say it's really tricky because it's not, as we said at the beginning, it's not something that it's still treated as almost a taboo. It's still treated as like
Yeah,
this thing where we don't mention it because we don't want to upset a family member or a person that we know, because it's
yeah,
quite a intimate issue. And
yeah,
it's good to know that there is support out there. And as like you said, it's that whole thing of allowing a family member to be able to do the research, to be able to then help where they can. Obviously, we can't. The person's the one going through it. It's like anything with mental health, anything like that. The person's the one going through it. We can only do so much. But it's
yeah.
nice to know that there are things out there and things to support these women going through it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And if they can be encouraged to just seek out a professional to go to, I think because it's come such a long way now, it's great, and I think they'll get the support. But there are a lot of really great support groups online, and once again, that partner or that family member could just gently nudge that person towards that, which would be really great, fantastic. Yeah.
I mean, we're going to come on to the link of menopause and nutrition, but I wanted to just briefly ask you: are there any like medications that can support with perimenopause?
Yes, most definitely. So most people sorry, no, not most people. A woman, maybe a midlife woman, would have heard about what's called HRT, or sometimes
Yeah,
called MHT, and those initials stand for HRT stands for hormone replacement therapy, and
yeah,
MHT stands for menopause hormone therapy. And there's a movement to try and start calling it MHT. Anyway, so those are both the same thing. Now, this is actually widely available through the NHS, your NHS GP. And
yeah,
what people don't understand, this is actually a hormone therapy that's really great to use in perimenopause. So not once a person's gone into menopause. Sure, they can use it once it's gone into
yeah,
menopause, but actually for those ups and downs and big, massive bumps, with not everyone, but some people that you
yeah.
go through in perimenopause, the MHT helps a lot, and it's really good. It's really, really helpful. So, although I'm a nutritionist and absolutely food comes first for me and the food's healing properties, I recognize totally that MHT is a really valuable and really safe drug. It's fantastic. There's a much more modern type of it. There used to be a lot of hype about, oh, it's maybe it causes cancer, maybe it's not so good for me, it's unhealthy or whatever. That was like 20 years ago. Well, actually now it's a different style of drug or type of drug, and
Yeah.
it's brilliant.
I'd imagine it. I would imagine the way it kind of works is it kind of just levels out. So instead of you having these massive drops, you have a bit more of balanced hormones, and that kind of eases the roller coaster rather than just a straight
Yeah.
drop.
Absolutely spot on, exactly that. And it's the estrogen, why the estrogen is so good these days is it's done transdermally. So you either have a gel you rub on yourself, or you stick a patch on, or there's even a
Yeah,
spray and that sort of thing. And that's great. So it works in the body, but it doesn't have to go through the liver, which was the problem with the old HRT. It's really
That makes
fantastic.
that makes a lot of sense. As I say, a lot of time the problem with drugs is the process through the body because it has the impact
Yes.
on the liver. So that makes so
Yes.
much more sense. I'd say it's one of those
Yes,
things that
exactly.
we just don't talk about. So that's why I'm being quite naive with some of my questions. It's
Absolutely.
because we don't we don't talk about it, particularly my generation. We're just kind of, oh, that's that thing that happens to you when you get old. That's a lot of
I
my
know what you're
generation's
talking
approach.
about.
But coming back, obviously we spoke about the medical side of dealing with the perimenopause and menopause. Obviously, your specialist area is nutrition. What role does nutrition play when it comes to perimenopause, and what has some of your work shown you?
Yeah, so that's a big question, but actually it can be also a simple question in the sense that, first of all, what I found in clinic and then what I found with research that backs it up is a plant focused way of eating, not fully plant based. Doesn't have to, you don't
Hmm.
have to be vegan or a vegetarian, but a plant focused way of eating, hands down, that's hands down helps to relieve symptoms in just in everybody. How much is up to is depends on the individual and their symptoms and how much they can get to grips with this style of eating.
Yeah.
But when you look at the research talks about fiber helps to reduce perimenopause and postmenopause symptoms. The Mediterranean style way of eating helps to reduce the menopause symptoms and the perimenopause symptoms. So it's there in the research and it's there in my clinic work and I've seen it. So really simply put, it having quite a heavy plant focused way of eating, which is actually, if you think about it, the Mediterranean
Yeah.
style diet anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're talking about plenty of vegetables and fresh fruit, and we're talking about whole grains and nuts and seeds and legumes, pulses, beans and herbs and spices. And absolutely, it doesn't mean you can still have dairy and eggs and lean meat and some fish and stuff, but if the main focus of if you're looking
Yeah.
down on your kind of plate or bowl or whatever you're eating, if the kind of there's there's that kind that
Yeah.
plantness in
Yeah.
there. That's it. That's that. Absolutely. And there's many reasons why, which I can delve into, but
Yeah.
really that's the answer. That is the answer there, as simply as possible, is plant focused way of eating.
Why is it that plants have such an impact?
Yeah.
Obviously, I imagine it is the mineral side of things and the nutritional benefits of plant based. But is there a specific thing that you should be looking for?
Well, this is it. So the reason why it seems that a plant focused way of eating really helps with the symptoms is quite a number of things. And it's a lot is it connected actually with the gut and the gut microbes. But in
Mm,
fact, what plant foods have in them, they've got fiber, amazing,
yeah.
absolutely amazing. And in fact, digestive issues, gut bloating, constipation, things like that is very common in the perimenopause. Disturbed, basically your bowels become a bit more disturbed. So fiber, and there's lots of different fibers in plant foods. And then they've got polyphenols in them. Now,
Yeah.
polyphenols are plant bioactives, and they are just in every plant food, all different, thousands of different ones, and they are amazing. They act like this kind of total rocking vitality, antioxidant, just brilliant, like ultra vitamin almost, but they're not a vitamin at all, but that's how they act in the body. And we humans love them, but
Yeah.
actually so do our gut microbes. Fantastic. And you get anti-inflammatory benefits from them like you do with the fiber. And then what else have you got in plant food? You've got all the gorgeous vitamins and minerals. Done.
Yeah.
Amazing. We know that they affect people's energy and mental health brilliantly. And so you've got that. And then you have got protein in there. Fine. You've got plenty of protein in plant food. Then you've
Yeah.
also got phytoestrogens in plant food, naturally occurring, and not just in soy foods. They're in all pulses, legumes, beans. They're in all nuts and seeds. They're in many plant foods. They're just in various amounts, which is why we think of
Yeah.
soy foods and phytoestrogens. And they have a weak beneficial estrogenic effect in the body, which helps a woman in perimenopause and postmenopause. That's fantastic. So you see,
Yeah.
there's a lot of that going on. It's but the primary thing that eating a plant-based sort of diet, so to speak, is this anti-inflammatory benefit. And perimenopause and postmenopause is a very inflammatory stage in that person's body. And it kind of dampens that all down, which is why it has this beneficial flow on effect of reducing all the symptoms. So yeah, it's really good.
How
Yeah.
how long would someone have to focus on plant-based eating and eating more plant-based for them to see an impact?
I they'd see an impact in 24 hours.
That
Yeah,
far? Wow, that's
yeah.
I wouldn't expect it
They
to be
would
that
see.
fast.
No, right. So here we go. Let's talk about that. So, first of all, actually, I don't like someone to switch straight into this all singing, all dancing, plant-based
Yep,
way of eating from, let's say, a traditional Western style diet. So because they're going to get massive gut bloating and they might get massive constipation or massive diarrhea,
yep,
actually, when they
yep,
switch over, it's whoa, too much. So they need
yep,
to do it gradually. Maybe adding an extra veg in with their evening meal, or instead of like a sandwich at lunchtime, they could possibly have more of a kind of like a salady kind of orientated
yep,
meal, maybe not. Maybe they just add in a small handful of nuts and seeds every day somewhere. Does, on their breakfast if they eat breakfast, or as a snack, or but just
yep,
those few things, that alone can really start to have a noticeable effect. We also know that if you add in a little bit more plant food, so i.e. a bit more fiber gently into
yep,
the way you're eating, within 24 hours we see a difference in a person's gut microbiome. So that's part of what's kind of, it's so interrelated, because I'll go just talk to you about that. When we feed our gut microbiome well with plant-based food, plenty of fiber, polyphenols, then actually they effectively eat that food as well, and they sort of effectively poop out anti-inflammatory chemicals. This is a great thing. You can imagine people think, ooh, really? Ooh. But actually this is brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And those anti-inflammatory chemicals, we'll call them, benefits go all around the body, and they have this wonderful anti-inflammatory effect, which is just fantastic. It makes us happier, it makes everything work better. And so that can even happen within 24 hours. Obviously, as time goes on, it just gets better, and
yep.
hopefully somebody can just switch over a little bit more and then a little bit more towards that kind of the mixing up more plant food, just here, there, everywhere, maybe a tablespoon of lentils tossed onto their plate,
Yeah.
and then gradually increase.
What about, obviously you just spoke there about not transitioning completely in
Mm,
one go.
yeah,
Is there any specific foods or things that you should first look at adding? I don't like the idea of like one thing being
I
like
know.
the god of all, but if there is one, like if you said I can only change one thing, what do I change? What would that one thing be?
Yeah, okay. So I would suggest, and it's a very niche, but because as you say, it's not the god of all things at all. It's not a superfood, because all plant food are superfoods. But I would suggest someone buys ground flaxseed, and sometimes it's called linseed. It's actually exactly the same seed, and they have a tablespoon, or probably wouldn't even start with that. They have like a half a tablespoon or a dessert spoon or something somewhere in their day. Now, you wouldn't just eat it like that. It's absolutely disgusting eating it just in your mouth. It tastes like you're chewing, or I don't know, cardboard, and it's very sticky when it comes in contact with liquid. So the liquid in your mouth, and
Yeah.
you go, what the heck? And you'd be, it would just be. So you mix it into some yogurt, or you mix it into some milk, or into a smoothie, or if you're having a sort of a breakfast that's got like a bit of a yogurt or a milk type of base to it, you just mix it in. It does suck up some of the liquid, so it does make that breakfast a little bit kind of either gloopier or
Yeah.
drier. That's a
Yeah.
good thing. So you just add a bit more liquid in, whatever that would be. I would prefer it to be yogurt or something, but there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with milk, but yogurt's even better for you. That's all. As long as the yogurt's not sickly sweet and over sweetened and that sort of thing. Yeah. So I know that is very picking on one thing, but there is so much going on in a flaxseed that is profoundly good in perimenopause and that early postmenopause stage. Because remember, menopause is one day officially in a woman's life.
Yeah.
So actually, really, we talk postmenopause and perimenopause. So it's just got everything in it that I've just talked about as being beneficial in a plant-based diet. It's just got brilliant soluble and insoluble fiber. It's got the polyphenols in it. It's got protein in it. It's got many different like vitamins and minerals in it. It's fantastic. Yeah.
It's interesting because flaxseed, so they're used across the board when you think of health and wellness, and it just shows that there are certain foods and items that just seem to always come out on top. But it's interesting to see that they are so strong when it comes to the perimenopause and going through that.
That's right. That's right. They even contain phytoestrogens, something called lignans, which are in them. But actually, it's totally okay for guys to have them as well. It doesn't affect them negatively whatsoever. In fact, guys can convert that. In fact, guys have some estrogen in them anyway. But now we're getting away into a different area. So yeah. So it is interesting. I agree with you. Flaxseed is actually in ground flaxseed is just amazing for any adult human. It's just really good. It's great for a teenager as well. Yeah, it's really good.
I think it's that classic thing of consistency is key. It's whenever I speak of health, because everyone speaks to me from doing a lot of sport, and I'm like, it's just whatever you can do every day. Don't overcomplicate it. A lot of the time we get caught up in that. If I mess up once, then the whole thing goes out the window. I'm like, no, just add it in when you can, because it's more important that you're consistent with it rather than having a week where you have loads of it and then none of it. Is that the same approach when it comes to using nutrition to support through the menopause? Of as long as you can stay consistent with it, you'll see impact over time.
Absolutely, totally. That's it, Charlie. Done. Tick that big, massive box there. Absolutely. Really. That is it. And to be honest, everything I'm talking about here that helps this person in the perimenopause or postmenopause, it's really this sort of style of eating is great for every adult. We know this, don't we? We know a Mediterranean style diet or a plant focused, remember, doesn't have to be fully plant based, but a plant focused way of eating, hands down, is being shown to be amazing for humans. Really amazing.
100%. And it comes back to the point we made earlier. Variety is the spice of life, in terms of I always implore people to just try different foods. Similar, I am a big fan of the Mediterranean food. It's just light, healthy, and it's just nice. It's not overcomplicated, which is one of my favourite things when it comes to Mediterranean. It's never overcomplicated. Whereas us Englishmen, we like to overcomplicate things and make things very heavy. So 100%.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Look, if someone chops up a bit of an onion, if they've not got any time, they do like a spring onion, not a hard onion. I don't know. The bigger bold onions. I should know how to describe an onion.
Isn't it technically brown?
Brown onions, but you can also get purple I know what you mean. A big bold onion. So if they just chop up some spring onions, very finely chop up a bit of cabbage, grate some carrot, literally what else might be. I mean, look, if they've got a little bit of broccoli in their fridge, just chop it up really thin. So not the florets you get, when you buy frozen broccoli, which is really good, by the way, frozen broccoli, just as good as fresh. But they're already obviously broken up into the florets for you. I'm talking about taking one of those florets and at least cutting it into quarters. So, or even sort of almost slicing up a broccoli floret, like as if you were grating it. Anyway, if you chuck all that in a fry pan with a bit of olive oil, it will cook in minutes. You've got yourself the most brilliant vegetables. And yes, now you need to add some protein. I don't know what that would be. Depends on that person. For me, I might open a can of lentils and I'll make chuck some lentils in that. I might add some dried herbs that are in the cupboard, some salt, some pepper. I might get some firm tofu, block of firm tofu, which is already cooked. Tofu is already cooked when you buy it in the shop. And I might just crumble it into that dish, just as if it was like feta cheese.
Yeah.
And then I've got plenty of protein in there. And, and the herbs and the salt and the pepper, they're adding flavor. And I've done that I swear I've done that in maybe 7 minutes. Yes, I've got to have that in my house, but
Yeah.
oh, yeah, done.
Definitely, I'm completely with you. I'm notorious for just for my partner will tell you, chuck it in a pan and see what happens. As
Yes.
I say, it's just what don't, as we said earlier, don't overcomplicate it.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
Although,
Or making a
oh
coleslaw. Yeah, sorry. Don't get
no,
me on
no,
food too fast because I will
honestly,
go down that route.
I wanted to touch on, obviously, we spoke about one thing to support people through menopause and perimenopause, but you've actually developed a product to support with perimenopause and menopause, which is Herrera Rise. And I just wondered if you could speak on
Yeah.
that a little bit of like where the idea came from, what the journey's been like, and sort of where you are now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is the thing. So I find with the women that I see in my clinic, the women I interact with on social media, and kind of the knowledge I've got, I find that it isn't one thing, and isn't that that's so true about life? And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know you're right all over this. So yes, there's the HRT or the MHT, and then there's my nutrition and trying to encourage people to eat the plant-focused food, the Mediterranean style diet. And then there is exercise. Any exercise is great in perimenopause, menopause. Absolutely helps to reduce symptoms. Obviously, trying to aim to get a good quality night's sleep.
Yeah.
Support the sport networks you talked about earlier. Having a family member there on your side with you. So all of that helps a person feel great and
Yeah.
better. You know, and menopause can actually not be too bad. We're talking about the worst sort of symptoms here.
Yeah.
And that's great. But actually what I found, so in my clinic, I found that when women take a few key supplements like magnesium, that sort of thing, maybe some B vitamins, magnesium and B vitamins help with energy, blood sugar balance, mood, that sort of thing. A lot of women swear that magnesium helps them with their sleep. It's very individual.
Yeah.
Sometimes women get cramping in perimenopause. Magnesium seems to help, not with everyone,
Yeah.
but with some people. So I found that a few key supplements help, but I got quite frustrated with this kind of like the roundup. So some people would come see me in clinic and they would literally they'd show me, maybe
And
8 supplements they were
yeah.
taking. And that's
Yeah.
not a way to live. That is not
Yeah.
a way to live. And I don't like that. And so I thought, okay, so what really helps? What do I know really helps? But how can I just do that in an easy way? Put it into like a supplement drink, say they just have every day. And so that's where I developed Herarise. So I just wanted, okay, as part of that toolkit, not
Yeah.
instead of, but as part of that toolkit of everything I've just mentioned,
Yeah.
having that each day, it really seems to help. So I'm delighted actually. And it was the first time I've ever formulated up a supplement. And it was an absolute delight to do it because I had this end goal in mind, really to try and help support people in that stage in their life. Yeah.
I'd imagine it's the same approach I always say to people with protein shakes. Protein shakes are great, but they are purely there for convenience if you're struggling to
Absolutely.
hit a protein target. And I'd imagine it's the same scenario with Herarise in terms of
Yep.
it's something you can just grab and go rather than
Yeah.
today. We've all been there
Yeah.
when you read about all these great supplements that do great things where you'll end up with like 40 pills and you're going,
I know.
right, I've got to take all this lot.
No. Yeah, I know. And I do say to somebody, okay, you've got these supplements. Okay, so stop one of these for 4 weeks. See if you
Yeah.
notice the difference. As in, do you miss them?
Yeah.
And so I do challenge people on them as well. And I sort of, does this make a difference? If it does, it's worth it. Beneficial difference, noticeable difference. If it doesn't, it's not worth it. And the same goes for Herarise. For some people, they may not notice the difference. Most people do, but yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, I'm feeding my little business brain with this because
Yeah.
supplements, developing a supplement or bringing a supplement to market, whenever I think of it, I'm like, that sounds like a really intense process because I'd imagine there's a
Yeah.
lot of legal stuff that you have to go through. What was the journey like developing Herarise? Like, how involved were you with the development? Obviously, you co-founded it, so I would imagine you'd be fairly involved. But what was the journey like? Is what I'm intrigued by.
Okay, right. You're absolutely right. There is massive involved, and naively, of course, I went into it thinking, "Oh, I'll just formulate this up," and but I didn't actually understand quite how all the different nutrients I wanted to go in would would react together and be able to would they all be stable sitting in this
Yeah,
supplement powder to go in this drink. How would it affect people? And I didn't want it to be ridiculously powerful. I know that sounds really crazy thing to say, but I needed it to make a difference, but not to send someone to a spin. Some supplements actually can make people actually almost agitated or even more anxious because they're just too strong. So
yeah,
I knew this, but I just really didn't know how to actually formulate. So, funnily enough, I went back to one of the professors on my degree had become a formulator. And
ah,
he was working in this just fantastic company in Australia. And so I went to him and I said, this is what I would like.
yeah,
This is my list of what I'd like in it. He said, okay, let's start. Let's really sort this out.
yeah,
And so he helped me formulate, and they are a really high quality manufacturing company, really super high quality. And I ended up deciding to manufacture in Australia. It's really tough. It's actually tougher than even the UK or EU legislation, but I just trusted him and therefore I trusted them. And
yeah,
so we did have to go through a lot of legislation and a lot of approval and tick all the boxes. And it was tested to make sure that everything that says on the product that's in there is in there.
yeah.
And yes, yes. So
How
it
long?
was a
How long
long
did?
journey.
Yeah, how long did
Yeah,
it take to,
great question.
from start to finish? Like as I say, because whenever I think of developing a product, I think people underestimate how long that process is.
Yeah, yeah. So because we had to go through three different tweaks of the formula in the
Mm,
end. So I thought naively it would take about a year to go start to finish, but it took about about a year and a half. Yeah, about a year and a half.
uh,
So I suppose that's not too bad, but I was pushing it the whole way through, just making sure I kept it moving. Yeah,
were you able to
yeah.
stay like keep your? It sounds really silly, but I'm always intrigued by it. Were you able to stay? Keep your motivation up because sometimes I think from friends that have developed product, it can feel like it's a never ending. Like, are we ever going to get there?
Yeah, yeah, no. I know that, and there are times where it's really, really. Come on, let's just do this. Let's do
Yeah,
this. But no, because I genuinely wanted this drink for the people that I knew, and I just felt, look, the end goal is I just want to make their life easier, but give them something, a part of that toolkit that would really help. So no, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. And meanwhile, other supplement companies were coming out with different things, kind of we
similar.
not similar to us, but kind of with the same idea in mind. But I thought, no, we're going to do this. We're yeah, we're going to do, and we did.
I bet, yeah, I must admit, it looks like it's done absolutely amazing. I mean, it's obviously not a product that I would use for obvious reasons, but as I say, I'm a big believer of supplements like that, of bringing convenience, because everyone's got these chaotic lives, particularly now, where
Yeah,
everyone's working, kids, everything else going on.
that's
So,
it.
yeah.
That's
What
it.
was,
That's
what, wa-
exactly right. Yeah.
what was your biggest challenge with it? What was your biggest challenge developing
Okay.
it?
Well, this is funny. I wanted some blueberry powder in there, for example,
Mm,
because
yeah,
I wanted plant extracts in there, not just vitamins and minerals, because it's the plant extracts as well that have this profound anti-inflammatory effect in the body. And I wanted
yeah,
partly for the same reason, like you just said, people are busy. If they don't get a perfect meal or meals in the day,
yeah,
they can be supporting themselves with Hero Rise as well. So I wanted to get a variety of plant extracts in there, and one of them was blueberries. But interestingly enough, in Australia, it wasn't global. In Australia, dried blueberry powder was going through this kind of odd ban, and I never got to the bottom of it, and I don't know why, but we couldn't use blueberry powder, and so I went, okay, and that was just a really odd thing. So we actually put in bayberry powder, which is another type of berry, but it was just these odd things were just thrown up when we
Yeah.
thought we got the formula sorted. Then the Therapeutic Goods Administration, one of the governing bodies in Australia, said, no, you know what? We're not going to allow blueberry powder in supplements. I never got to the bottom of it. It was something to do with, I don't know, actually. I really don't know
The
why.
Aussies are so fussy with what they. I understand it. I understand why, but they are so fussy with what you can and can't do. It always amazes me. Like, there's certain things, like my cousin lives in the U and in Australia, and some of the things like you can't bring back and you can't bring through. I'm like, really? But
Yeah.
it works, but I can completely see why that would be really frustrating, sitting there going, but why? It's just blueberry powder. Because I think for me, my brain would go, but you can pick up blueberries in the supermarket over there. Why can't I put it in a supplement? It's
right. Absolutely. So so there you go.
so strange.
But it didn't. It wasn't really a compromise, but it was just a change. So yeah. Anyway, yep. It was very odd. Very odd. Yeah.
What about your biggest highlight with Herarise?
The feedback from people. So this is the thing. Everybody's unique. I mean, I already know this. One supplement might work brilliantly for one person, but not for another, or have a different effect. But the feedback has been really special. So one person's felt calmer. So I knew it would affect people's kind of mind, mental health, thinking, mood, but I didn't know kind of to how much of an effect. And this person said she feels calmer, which is fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And another person says she's sleeping better, and another person saying they're pooing better. And because there's all sorts of different things in it that help all of those situations. But it's getting the feedback and hearing that actually it has had that effect. And it's an effect that I wanted in various people. But no one's saying to me, I feel calmer, I'm sleeping well, and I'm pooing better. Because everyone's unique, and it's their particular thing that's maybe bothering them the most. And that's what they notice. And that's fine. It's fine. It's the feedback. It's just an absolute joy to hear that it's having a beneficial effect. Yeah.
I love that. It's exactly the same whenever I get to help someone that's got a similar condition to me or has similar needs to me. Exactly the same feeling of anytime I'm able to help someone just through that. It's amazing. So I hear you. Feedback is probably one of my favorite things with all the work that I do. So I can completely relate to that. But I just wanted to close off with the last question that we ask every guest, which is, what's one piece of politically correctness that you really strongly agree with or disagree with?
Well, I don't know if it's political correctness. It's quite frustrating online amongst my community. I have a lot of doctors I both work with and are on Instagram with me, and we're all frustrated by the lack of the being able to talk about female hormone genitalia, like vaginas, online. And it's because this is a really important step. So the problem is, one of the problems in perimenopause, for example, like I explained kind of right at the start of the podcast, is you might get dry eyes, dry mouth, dry vaginas. But a lot of women are really shy about going to their doctor and saying, I've got a dry vagina. And some women have such sore vaginas just from literally walking around. They can't even wear jeans, tight jeans or anything, something like that. Or they can't exercise like they used to. And they won't say anything. And it's just, we need to open it up. And I get why it's so hard on social media to talk about that, when it might go into the realms of sort of pornography, and although we're not talking about it like that. So I get how social media goes, I don't know, guards or whatever can't filter it through. But it's so important. It needs to be talked about more. I know it's not a nutrition subject, but it's in my community. It's quite a frustrating area because it is so easily solved in perimenopause. It is literally so easy because there's something called vaginal estrogen, and it's absolutely safe. And it's tiniest bit of estrogen that a woman can use in her vagina, and it just sorts it out. I mean, so that's one of my, it's a bugbear just amongst my community anyway. Yeah.
I hear it. One of my good friends, he's been on the podcast as well, Damien. He's a sexual health specialist, particularly around disability, and he has the same debate of how can he understands the reasons why, but then also it's like how do we educate people if they can't access the information, and if the information being provided has good intent and has no malice or wrong intention behind it, and it's purely for educational purposes, why can't that happen? Because particularly when you open the debate of pornography, a lot of wrong education's happening there. So that was why I was grinning as you were saying it, because I was like, I completely understand where you're coming from, because it's a debate me and him have had many a time about how do you solve it.
Yeah. And the thing is, if it's talked about more, then more women will realise, oh, well, that's just a perimenopause symptom and I can sort that out. I go to my GP. It is on actually these days, and this is a good change. I think it only happened at the beginning of this year. You can go to a pharmacist and say, I'm in then you might not know you're in perimenopause, but you can say, I've got this dry vagina issue and I don't understand it. And that pharmacist is educated now to be able to also hand over something that'll help you. It's fine. You don't even have to go to the GP now. Yeah.
It's really good to know. And I think, that's a whole other debate, but the pressure on GPs as well.
I know, but you did ask.
No, honestly, the pressure on GPs and everything, it's, I think, that's a whole other debate. But, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on. I've learned so much, and I think this is going to be a really impactful episode, particularly, as I say, it's a completely new topic to me, and I think it's going to help a lot of people. But of course, I will link all of your social media and everything so that if anyone wants to follow you, check in with you, ask you a question, they can get in contact with you. But thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Charlie. Fantastic to meet you and be on the podcast. Brilliant.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Not Quite Podcast. Please make sure you follow us on TikTok and Instagram to get regular updates about the podcast.